answer.
No worries at all.
Okay, cool. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? First of all, thank you all for coming tonight. We've got a nice group of you here, and we always put these on YouTube the next day. So whoever couldn't make it to see it in person or over Zoom, we'll have this resource living on our YouTube page and our web page. So it'll live on as a good, valuable resource for everybody. So I have a couple of very quick announcements to make, and then I will pass the Zoom to you, Rebecca. So okay. So the first one, the big one for Sustainable Claremont is that we have a big event coming up, our annual Earth Day celebration. That's taking place Sunday, April 21st. So somehow only 2 short weeks away from us now. It's going to be a great event. We're going to have native tree and plant giveaway, composting workshops, a foraging walk. We're going to have some folks from Cal BG there to talk about the plants that we have. 8 or 10 exhibitor booths from local organizations. So it should be a really fun event for everybody of all ages. We also have another follow-up sustainability dialogue which we're pairing with this really in just a few short weeks on April 29th. And that's going to be an in-person dialogue, our first in-person dialogue, I believe, since COVID some time ago. So we're doing this one a little bit different. Instead of having it at the large auditorium at Hahn Classroom, we'll be at Last Name Brewing. So that's Monday, April 29th from 6:30 to 7:30. So a little bit different time. So show up at Last Name, find us there. And that should be a good addition to what we're going to be talking to today. We're going to have some folks who have gone through this process and who will be able to talk about how they went through it, how it worked, maybe any watch outs that they had. And so it should be a good follow on. We also have our Waterwise Community Festival. So we're working with the California Botanic Garden again. 2 years ago, we had this for the first time, and we had a great turnout and a lot of positive feedback. So again, we'll have a bunch of exhibitor booths, a bunch of educational talks, a lot of resources for just learning about the water that we have, how we can protect this valuable resource, and especially in these years of abundance, how we make sure that we don't, burn through, but, let it wash away when we have it. And so all the different things that we should be thinking about before the next drought begins, right? Fingers crossed that's off into the future. We also have our Sustainable Claremont Earth Day fundraiser going, and we are selling some Sustainable Claremont swag. So my great colleague Han might pop some links in the chat if you're interested in any of that. If you do have any questions or comments during Rebecca's presentation, feel free to just drop those in the comments. And then Rebecca, if you see them, that's great. And if you don't see them, my colleague and I will just collect them throughout the presentation, and we could provide those to you once you're done. Or if people want to hold their comments till the end, we could have people unmute themselves and ask their own questions. Okay, so Rebecca is coming back to us after a couple of years. We had her come speak to us almost 3 years ago, I think, about the drought and California's water. And Rebecca is the press office manager of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. She helps reporters and the public understand the engineering, science, policies behind bringing water to Southern California. And she helps the public understand the value of the water, the need to use it efficiently. She was a Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper reporter in LA, Washington, D.C., and Costa Rica for 15 years, and 3 years of updated data since then, Rebecca. So before I throw this to Rebecca, last piece of sort of context to this. Last year, the Sustainable Claremont Board worked to identify some of the priority areas that we as an organization have. And one of those areas was water conservation and water use. So we have an amazing water action group that meets periodically to talk about, how we could better educate ourselves and the public about, the issues surrounding water use in the area. And so they're the ones to be credited for putting together these great dialogues and talks that we have today and in the next few weeks. And also framing how we ought to be thinking about water, like I said, in these years of abundance, and how we maintain this valuable resource that we have. So Rebecca, we're super thankful to have you here with us today, and let me see how quickly I can make you host so you can share your screen. So give me 1 second here.
Great. And in the meantime, I'll share the most important part of my bio, which is that I am a former neighbor of several of your
Yay,
unfortunately
Boston.
former. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Let
you should
me.
be able to now.
Okay. All right. We there? Yeah.
Great.
All right. So let's see. There we go. All right. The first thing that, just to begin, before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of the program and how to apply, I just want to thank you guys all for your interest in this, and I appreciate what you just said, that water has become, a very important part of your program and what you guys are working on. For us at Metropolitan, this turf replacement program is really, really important to us. When we look ahead to how to build a sustainable Southern California and adapt to climate change, this program is really important to us, and it's just, in general, getting rid of non-functional turf and recognizing the real value that comes from removing grass, that, like, particularly grass that no one is playing on. We call it grass that, like, if the only time you're ever on it is to mow it, then there's no reason to have it. Get rid of it. Certainly, if if turf, for playing soccer or sports or whatever, if you're actually have little kids who are running around on the grass, great, that's fine. But there is so much grass out there in Southern California that is just serves no purpose, and we would all be much better off to replace it with California friendly and California native landscaping. And it does so much for the environment, but from Metropolitan's perspective, it can save an enormous amount of water. If you look across the region, up to 70% of all water used in urban Southern California is used outdoors on landscapes. And when you think about how valuable and critical this resource is, and the fact that we're using 70% of it on our lawns, it's pretty incredible. And that number, up to 70%, in communities like Claremont, which are warmer and drier, that certainly, we're on the higher end here in Claremont in the amount of water that gets used on lawns. And when you make the switch to particularly California native landscapes, there's a lot of different plants that you could replace your lawns with that are beneficial. But if you replace it with all natives, you can reduce your water use by up to 85%. So just a really valuable program. Really excited you guys are interested in it. So the funding for the rebate program, the turf rebate program, comes from Metropolitan Water District, but the program is actually run by, we contract an agency called SoCal Water Smart, and they're the ones who you're going to actually apply for when you apply for this rebate. Go to the website, SoCalWatersmart.com, and I'm going to walk you through this process a little bit. But so, Metropolitan is part of it. We've got a lot of resources that I'll share later as well, but the actual application process is done through SoCal WaterSmart, and they run all of our rebate programs, and there's a bunch of other rebates that you can find on their website. All right, so let's get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts. So one of the things that you'll see in this is that it's about saving water, actually putting less water on your yard. But you'll note that in some of the program requirements, we've got a multi-pronged approach of what we're trying to do here. We also have an element that's requiring stormwater capture, permeable landscape. These features that are meant to not just reduce the amount of water that you're using on your lawn, but actually capture some of that water and keep it, get it into the groundwater basin, keep it on your property so that it's not just running off into storm drains. So the program has evolved from where we were, 5-10 years ago during the 2014-2015 drought, when this program really took off. We didn't have these same rules, and so we've learned a lot since then in trying to make this a much more sustainable program, and including these different features. It does make the program a little bit more. there's a little bit more rules to comply with, whereas, back in the day, 10 years ago, you could throw down some artificial turf, get your rebate. But we've recognized that that's really not the best, most sustainable approach. Back then, we were literally just trying to get rid of as much grass as possible. We've now realized that there's a much better approach to it. So these are the big top program requirements. Stormwater capture feature. I'll go over what those includes, but there's a lot of different options: swales, a rock feature, even just a rain barrel counts. Then we've got a minimum amount of plants that are required. You can't just remove your grass and just leave it with dirt. We do require that you have at least 3 plants per 100 square feet. And then again, permeable, hardscape, mulch requirement, and efficient irrigation. And I'll get into all the details of this in a little bit. And again, this incentive is for, we've got for homes and for businesses. So right now, the rebate is actually, the base rebate is $3 a square foot. We got Metropolitan got a grant from the state to up that to $3. Until about 2 months ago, it was $2 a square foot. So right now is a really good time to apply. It's at $3 a square foot. Once we run out of those state grant funds, it'll go back down to $2. I will note, however, that if you have friends or family who live in other communities, that rebate can be much higher. Many of our member agencies add additional incentives onto that $3. So like in LA, I think LADWP's right now is $5 or $6 a square foot. Unfortunately, Three Valleys does not add any additional funding. So we're at $3 here in Claremont. But as you're talking to other folks, that incentive can be a lot larger. And the fact of the matter is, this isn't the cheapest project to take on. You'll hear, from the folks who've done it at the last name event in a couple of weeks that the $3 it doesn't cover it. You have to be really good at stretching your dollar to get that to cover the entire cost of the project. But it does help, and it does cover some of the cost. But it often, at that amount, it often does require a little bit of an investment on the part of the homeowner as well. But it's better, and I mean it is something. All right, so you're going to go to so as far as, let me back up, as far as the amount that you're going to get. You can estimate this. The first thing you probably want to do is figure out how much you're going to get. So you can go to SoCal Water Smart, and in various locations on their website, you'll see this estimate your rebate. You can go there. All you have to do really quickly, it takes 5 minutes. Enter your address, your zip code, your city, your local water agency, your square foot of your front yard and your backyard. And once you enter those, it'll do the total. You can't just enter the total down here yourself. You've got to enter it in the front yard and backyard, and then estimate your rebate, and it'll provide you the amount. So again, if you have friends or family in other communities, they can find out quickly if they get more than that $3 per square foot. So that's the first thing you want to do, so you can figure out how much you're going to get and you can accommodate your budget accordingly. So the couple other rules, you got to submit the application yourself. If you are working with a contractor, they can help you, but you have to submit it yourself. The project that must have project must have existing grass. So if you want to apply for this rebate, don't start anything until you have submitted an application. Don't start killing your grass. Don't do anything like that. It can be dying, or dead, but don't remove it. Don't just apply for the rebate first. We've had a lot of situations where folks get excited and they get started on the project. They completely remove their grass and then they apply, and they can't prove that they've had grass in the past, and so they can't get the rebate. So before you do anything, apply. Once you've applied, you have 180 days to get the project done, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Again, no synthetic turf. All right, so it's a two-part application process. The first part, again, don't start the project until you've applied. You've got to gather some pictures of your grass. One of the things that's important to do as you're taking pictures is to make sure that you're showing that it's your house, right? You're not just getting like a general picture of lawn. You want to be able to identify that this is a home, so that you can later identify that this is the same home. A lot of these residential projects, nobody comes out to check to see in person. It's all done through photos. So it's really important to the people who are reviewing these applications that you're showing that this photo was taken at the before and after photos are taken at the same home, and you're able to kind of locate where you are on a property. So you apply. It takes a couple weeks for you to get the approval. And then once you get approved, you can begin your project, and you have 180 days to complete the project, so 6 months. And then you submit additional documents, and we'll get more into the details. You'll see that number right there. Questions, call this number. That's for SoCal Water Smart. You'll see it on your screen a couple of times. They are there to help you. Metropolitan has hired this company to run this program for us, and they do a great job at it. I refer people a lot to them. I've actually never applied for the rebate myself, but I can tell you that whenever I refer, I get a lot of calls. Just as the press office manager, my number is out there, so I get a lot of calls from the public asking questions about this program, and questions that I certainly cannot answer because they're very specific about their particular properties. And I say, hey, call this number, but knowing it's an 800 number, I'm like, call me back if for some reason you can't get through, if you have any issues. And I've never gotten a call back. So I assume their questions are getting answered. I can tell you that my colleagues who work more directly with them say they do great things. So write down that number and give them a call. All right. So once you are on that SoCal Water Smart website, again, it's all very, very simple. You'll see screens like this where you're putting in your, you've got to set up an account with your name, email address, 5 photos of the property of where you plan to remove the turf. Again, location markers, buildings, street signs, anything to show that this is your property. And then you want to submit a simple landscape plan, and I'll provide some examples of that in a second. Recent water bill. So it's the pre-approval process is pretty simple. We don't get, other than projects that people have already gotten rid of their grass, we don't get a lot of denials in this time. It's pretty simple. It takes a couple of weeks for them to get to your application and review it. And then once you've done it, you've got 180 days to complete the project. So while I do encourage you to take advantage of this extra $1, now that it's $3, don't apply for the funds until you're really going to do the project, because you do have to get it done within 180 days. So you could have a kind of if you're working with a professional, landscaper, you could have a more professional looking landscape design. This is what you have to submit as part of the pre-approval process. You could have something that's that looks like this, or you could just have something that you've sketched out yourself on a piece of paper, and this is perfectly fine as well. Just looking for the different elements that I talked about earlier, that you're going to have 3 plants per 100 square feet, that you're going to have a, the permeable landscape, and that you're going to have a stormwater capture feature. So again, a few more of the rules. Again, 3 plants per 100 square feet. Plants can be anywhere within the project area, but it needs to be in the ground. You can't have it in a planter or areas where there wasn't grass before. So again, whole idea is getting rid of your grass and replacing it with sustainable landscape. So you want to show that you're doing it. Here's how to do the math for figuring out how many plants to plant. If you're if you've been on a 1,000 square foot project, you'd need 30 plants. So as far as the stormwater capture element, so you can have a rain garden, which is just, as you can see, it's just loose soil, permeable landscaping, somewhere where the water is going to kind of collect and absorb. You can also have a rock garden, vegetated swales, and there's a lot of details on these different elements on the SoCal WaterSmart website, so you can get a lot more information about, you know, how to do this and what qualifies. But there's a lot of different things that you can do. Dry river beds, this is really popular. You see that a lot. Berms, which involve a little bit more landscaping, so that can be a little more of a challenge. And then rain barrels and cisterns also count. Important thing to note about rain barrels and cisterns is, one, there's rebates available for those. So, and I don't know if Three Valleys ever has giveaways, but a lot of our agencies have giveaways for these items. So those count. They do need to be connected properly to your gutters so that you're fully capturing all the rainwater that comes down. So you want a full wraparound coverage of your gutters to make sure that you're really taking advantage and really capturing the rain, and you're really taking advantage of that system. I will add, though, just, you know, all of these things, there's a lot more detail than what I'm providing here for all of these different elements on the website. So, you know, again, some of this stuff can seem a little bit intimidating, but once you sit down and you kind of read through what each of them takes, you can realize that certainly easier with a landscaper, but absolutely doable on your own, 100% doable on your own. And I think you'll hear that in a couple of weeks. It's you know, it takes some work, but it's certainly doable. Again, only permeable hardscapes are eligible. So paver, stepping stone, you can't have any non-permeable hardscapes. So no concrete patios, nothing like that. It's all got to be permeable. Again, the whole point is to not have these, you know, paved landscapes where, you know, your rainwater is running off into the street. Mulch, same deal. Sustainable, we want natural mulch. No dyed or rubber mulch will be accepted. You also want to have a 3-inch ring of mulch around your plants. So some, you know, gardeners all recognize the value of mulch in terms of capturing that both the irrigation as well as the natural rainfall. You know what? I don't have a slide on it, and I forgot. But one other thing that I didn't include a slide on is one of the other important elements or required elements is a water efficient irrigation system. What that means really is anything that's not your spray sprinklers, your overhead spray sprinklers. So there's, you know, obviously drip is what most people go to, but there's other irrigation systems that do qualify. And in fact, if you don't want to or have the funding to install an irrigation system, you can say your irrigation system is hand watering. You don't have to install an irrigation system. You'll find that a lot of gardeners will have told us, and I've actually found this in my own yard where I don't have an irrigation system, that once you get native plants established after a couple of years, you don't even have to hand water. I mean, these are native plants. They're meant for this climate. So if you can hand water them, you know, once every couple of weeks while they're getting established for the first couple of years, and then they're fine. So you don't actually have to install an irrigation system. But really anything that's not, you know, overhead spray irrigation that you used on your lawn qualifies. So, you know, again, in terms of the kind of barrier of how intimidating it can be to take on a project like this, if you're doing it on your own, recognize that at least, you know, that you don't necessarily have to install an irrigation system if that's something that is proving intimidating to you, and you have the time to hand water, which is always, you know, certainly time consuming, but also lovely to enjoy your new landscape. And we do have this new addition that I think some of you are aware of, which is our new tree rebate, which we're really excited about. So when, you know, when we first started doing this, and when we talk a lot about replacing grass with sustainable landscaping, one of the first criticisms that we get sometimes is, oh, what does that mean for the trees? Trees that if you're going to take out your grass, you're not going to be providing enough water for trees. We're going to, ruin our tree canopy, things like that. Certainly, that is not, Metropolitan really, really is concerned about that. And we've, we want to make sure that folks are taking care of their both established trees, but also recognizing the need to add to the tree canopy. And so we've added this new tree rebate. So you can get $100 per tree, up to 5 trees when you're doing this project. This is only for folks who are participating in the turf rebate program. And there are, so the trees must be planted within the project area where you've removed the grass. They've got to be a minimum of 15 gallons. They've got to be expected to grow a certain height. Fruit trees don't have to meet some of those minimum requirements, and fruit trees are only allowed on residential properties. The idea being that, if people are growing food, then certainly that's permissible. What was I? Oh, we do. So most generally the plants, people ask, well, what can I plant when I take out my grass? We don't have requirements on what allowed plants are. We encourage California friendly and California native plants. We don't have a specific list of plants that are allowed. We have a huge amount of recommendations. I'll show you some of those resources in a few minutes. But you can really plant anything. What limits it is that idea that you have got to change your irrigation system. Once you change your irrigation system, you're only going to want to have water efficient plants. Once you're hand watering, you only want to have water efficient plants. So that's kind of the limiting factor of what landscape is allowed. When people are actually doing these projects. Trees, on the other hand, we have restrictions on which trees are allowed. There are very specific trees. You can go to our website and find out what trees are allowed, but we do have restrictions on that. So while most plants, we don't really have restrictions when it comes to trees, we do have restrictions on what trees qualify for this rebate. But it's a cool rebate. The other thing I'll mention is there's advice. If you have existing trees, there's advice on our website about how to maintain those trees, to make sure that as you're removing your grass and those trees may be accustomed to a certain amount of water, that as you transition, that they're still getting the irrigation that they need to thrive and transition. And it's not terrible. So here's step 2. Once your project is complete, you have to do these submit photos again, go through these various steps, making sure that you have met all of the requirements, the plant coverage, the sustainable, the stormwater capture, where, your new irrigation system, and where the turf was replaced. It takes a couple of weeks to get your final approval, and then you get your check after a couple of months. If you find that that you're not approved, that you're rejected, they will tell you why, and they will encourage and invite you to address the issue. And again, if you call that number, they will walk things through for you. They will explain to you what exactly needs to be done, what's missing, how you can address the situation. We want you to get this rebate. We want you to be successful in this program. It's not meant to be onerous. It's really meant to be successful. And I also want to add that, if you're out there and you're finding that this is really complicated and much more of a challenge than this application process is, if you're hearing that it is challenging, Richard and Stuart, if you're hearing from folks in Sustainable Claremont that they're having a hard time with this, I'd ask you to let me know that, because we want to know that. Again, we want people to succeed with this. And again, we've got all of these additional elements to make sure that it is sustainable, but it's not meant to be overly burdensome for people to participate. So please, I welcome any feedback, and I'll share that with my colleagues who actually run this program. So common denials, pre-application, not enough plants in the design, pictures don't show landmarks, water bills missing. Again, you've already started when, before you applied, no actual pre-existing grass. Post-application, not enough plants. You don't have that storm water feature dialed in. You're not showing all the in elements. Use of invasive plants. So that is something that if you have questions about, again, we don't have requirements, but if you do have questions about plants, we don't want you using invasive plants. If you have questions about what plants are allowed, EGI, the SoCal Water Smart will answer that in a heartbeat. So that's a very easy question you can get answered. And I'll show you again that we have a wealth of resources on recommended plants, particularly, that are based on where you are in LA. Okay, so let's see. So SoCal Water Smart is where you apply. BeatWaterWise.com is Metropolitan's clearinghouse for all of our water conservation information. We've got a guide to how to kill your grass, so how you can do that yourself. It can be it can be tough, but you can certainly do it on your own. And not that it can be tough, but you've got to follow some steps, and this really walks you from start to finish on how to do it so that it doesn't come back. County plant guides, so what's best for LA, what's best for San Bernardino. A whole bunch of plant profiles on what great plants are for this region. Again, all of these resources are really great. And then we've also got, if you do want to hire somebody, we have some resources on how to find a landscaper who's qualified for our or who's passed. We have like a certification course and or various certification courses that have been set up by others, and we kind of have compiled them and made this kind of multi-pronged certification that you can find a landscaper who's qualified for all of that. Also at SoCal Water Smart, we've got a bunch of other rebates, so I'll just kind of click through some of these. Rain barrels, cisterns, you can get rebates for those. Rebates for various irrigation systems to set up, weather-based irrigation controllers, soil sensors, all of these different irrigation systems that can be really helpful as you're going through projects like this. And even if you're not, you can still get these rebates. They're still good. They save water. So even if you are going to keep your grass for a little while, you're not ready for this big change, we've got some great resources to help you save water. We also do these water efficiency surveys if you want somebody to come out to your house and see how you can be more water efficient. The residential ones are usually online unless you have particular circumstances. They'll bring somebody out, so it's usually online. They're still very useful. For businesses, we'll often come out and actually survey your business. We've got classes. This might be more than anyone's into. This is more for landscapers. But if you want to take a class on how to plant water efficient landscaping, you certainly can. You don't have to be a professional landscaper to do it. You could certainly take one of our classes as well. They're all free. All right. So now we're going to have a quiz. I forgot to tell you, we're going to have a quiz at the end of this. So, true or false? Stuart, you can begin work on your project before pre-approval.
False.
All right. How many plants do you need for 100 square feet of turf? I can't even read this because it's blocked by my project area. There we go.
3.
That's right. How many days do you have to get your project done?
180.
There we go. All right, you can use existing trees in your landscape. Of course you can. How many inches deep should the ring of mulch around the base of your plants be? Anyone know that
3.
one? Ah, there we go. All right, how many stormwater retention features are required? Just 1. That's how easy this is. All right, now this is a little more helpful. So looking at this, do you guys think this was approved or denied in the pre-approval? Denied. Why was it denied? I have no idea where this is. Is this, I see no house here. This could be anywhere. I've got no sense of location with this photo. So again, just want to make sure that you're including something, we're not trying to invade your privacy, but we do need some sort of identifier to show that that the project is in the same location. Similar here, approved or denied. This one was also denied. You can't see, it looks like they began the project already. They applied after they'd already started the project. That grass is pretty darn dead. So again, apply before you start your project. This one was approved. We've got one success story here. So this one was approved. It's got the elements, it's got mulch, it's got what we need. This one, denied, not enough plants. This one's a little tricky. Is this one approved or denied? Richard?
I'm not sure you can tell where it is.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could. I mean, we just need a general house in the background. We don't need it to be, you don't need your address or street name. What the problem with this one is that the cistern isn't set up properly. It's not a full wraparound stormwater capture. So that's the challenge. This one's a little bit of a tricky one. I actually didn't know this one. I had to ask my colleague, and this one was approved. So there we go. Write down that phone number. It's all over their website as well. But that's where you can ask all of your questions. You can call and ask questions in advance. What kind of plants? Is this plant allowed? Is this plant not allowed? Can I do this irrigation system? Any sort of questions they're there to answer. And here's my information as well in case you want to chat with me. Although the folks at the actual SoCal Water Smart are much more informed than I am about the project. So, but feel free to call me.
That looks like a Washington, D.C. number for the area code.
I did briefly live in Washington, D.C., very briefly, but I got my first cell phone there. And when I was a newspaper reporter, that 202 number came in handy. People out here, I'd call like local city council members, and they'd often think it was like, the president calling or something, and they'd get all excited and actually take my call. So I never changed it. And now, if you change your cell phone number, people will never find you again. And I always say I'm not ready to be lost yet.
Thank you for the explanation.
All right.
All right. Thanks for all that info, Rebecca. Are you cool to take some questions?
Yeah. I know there's a lot of info and I talk fast, so I apologize.
It's great. We've got 2 questions in the chat, but before that, I just want to drop in a link for the Chino Basin Water Conservation District's garden planner. I know that's been like super helpful for a lot of people who've gone through the program to learn what kind of plants they can use and get some ideas about how to situate their yard once they get rid of the turf. We have a 2 questions from Bob. The first one, I think you answered after he asked it, but we'll hit on it anyways, is are there any incentives or rebates for replacing impermeable, like concrete driveways, with permeable materials? So if somebody wanted to rip out their concrete driveway and put it bioswales, and it's nothing.
Not for Metropolitan, no.
Okay. Has to be
Sorry.
turf.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then the second question, sorry, I'm losing my voice here. In my experience, tree planting has been subject to serious errors because they're quite often poorly located. Is this being adequately addressed and coordinated with Claremont's new tree policy, documentation, and guidelines?
Did you say tree planting?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know about Claremont, but I can tell you that as part of this rebate, we worked very extensively with, again, this is for all of Southern California, but we've got a fantastic tree planting guide on our website on bewaterwise.com that provides an incredible amount of step-by-step information on tree planting and tree care that we worked with various regional arborists and tree people, like 3 different organizations, all vetted and provided input on this guide. So it was like a labor of love for several of our staff for like 6 months. So I think it's a pretty fantastic resource. So I'd encourage you to review that.
Great. Vanita, it looks like you have a question.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Rebecca for great presentation. And we used the program for our house like 8 years ago. We did step by step and got a great job done, and it's doing well. And then I kind of recommended to others also in the neighborhood what I have observed. I'm a licensed landscape architect, and I went through the process. What I've observed is that if they replace with a gravel, they put a plastic sheet underneath. So you see what is above, but you don't see what is below. So is there a way to kind of guide people? And if you're not from the industry, it's very hard for people using a local contractor to actually follow rule, because local contractors are not actually taught what those steps are. So this is my observation, and I've been thinking of passing this information to somebody, and you might be the right person to kind of at least bring it into the conversation. Another thing I've
Yeah.
noticed is that tree, when they have the tree and they're putting the gravel, you need to keep that zone for the tree to breathe. And
Yeah.
they will plant over where the root zone is. They'll put a cactus, but I don't blame the people because they are not aware and the
Right.
contractors are not trained. Even next to our office in Claremont, they pulled off this beautiful heritage garden and they put a turf over it. And everybody in the city walks besides it. It's on the main street on Yale. So how do we pass that information to the gardeners and the local contractors to follow certain guidelines?
I'll share that with our folks, but it
Please.
is, I mean, it is a challenge. And we have this certification process, and we've honestly struggled with trying to balance between kind of basic education, just kind of and the certification class, which is the certification class itself is lengthy. It's a many
Yes.
hours class to get full certification. So while that can certainly open up business opportunities for landscapers who participate, it's certainly not something that everyone is going to participate in because of the time commitment. So we've struggled to, how do we have like short, informational sessions to provide kind of basic level information like what you're sharing. And I can't say that we've come to any solutions on that. We've discussed it, and I'll pass that along as well.
Yes, and I'm on the board of Sustainable Claremont. So if you want our team to ever kind of assist you in the Claremont or areas around, I mean, I just design, I don't execute, but I observe these things because we studied it, right? So if there's anything we can help, contact Stuart and we'll be happy to.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And the program is great. I used it and successfully when we're in the middle of the drought. And every time I look out, and I had my son help me. So
Great.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rebecca, I have a quick question for you. Is there a minimum size? You might have touched on this, but is there a minimum size amount of turf that has to be replaced to be eligible?
It's 250 square feet, but if your yard is smaller than that, it's either your full yard or 250 square feet. So if your full yard is only 200 square feet, then that would qualify. But you can't just have like a giant yard and only do a 100 square foot parking area. You have to do 200 square feet would be the minimum.
Okay, great. Let's see if we've got any other hands up before I keep
Stuart, I'm sorry, I can't find my raise hand thing.
this work. Go ahead.
I have a
Yes.
question. Rebecca, I know that a lot of folks really want to kill their grass, in sort of a, by just using the summer to just cover it with cardboard or whatever. And that process is really good. It really kills all the various types of grasses that will drive you nuts and are difficult to kill. But it requires almost 6 months to do. And I'm wondering, is that an issue that you have run into with this program that, for example, Molly next door, by the way,
Yeah.
did a great job of killing, and it was about 6 months. So I'm not sure that she actually used the program. I think she got a rebate. Does anybody know?
She may have. It was a little bit longer during the drought because we didn't want people to plant it was actually like the 6 month thing has only recently been reinforced because we didn't want people necessarily planting plants during the drought that take water to get established, particularly in, communities like Claremont that really had very, very limited supplies. So that's a very good question, Richard. I will ask that. I think that there are definitely opportunities to provide for program extensions. The reason we have that 180 days is that the way that our funding streams work, we have we have to make sure that people are going to use them. We hold that money, and then a lot, quite honestly, it's like a 50% dropout rate. A lot of people ambitiously want to do these projects, but then they get down to it and they're like, I mean, it's life, right? It gets to be more than they're ready to do. It's not going to happen. So we need to put those monies back into circulation for somebody else to reserve. So that's why we have it. I think there are opportunities to apply for extensions if you're not getting it within the 180 days, but I'll confirm that. And I'm going to go to the thing at last name. I've got some, I have some of those like tree guides. We have some printed, I have some resources in print that I want to share. So I will find out the answer to that. That's a really good question. And it's a good point. I mean, there's ways to kill your lawn more quickly, but that's one of the easiest, but time consuming ways to do it. And yeah, that's a good question. So let me find that out.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Richard, what we had done was we let the irrigation out, and then put the cardboard for a while, but then had the gardener come and take at least 8 inches off. So, and then refill with good soil, because also the lawn kills the soil below. So it needed that whole effort, one extra effort. But that's how we met the timeline.
Oh.
Because we put that extra step because we knew that the soil is anyway dead. So we had to take it off.
Sounds a little expensive.
But they paid, right? So it's not, it balances out. And we did a lot of things by ourselves. We asked a contractor, he was paying, asking for 20,000, but by the time we did it, it was 5,000 and they provided 2,000. So it kind of balances out. If you do it as phases instead of having a big contractor come and give a big price on it. So it's just some logistics that needs to go in, but the program is great. Thank you.
Rebecca, is there a pot of money for this that can be extinguished each year? So do people need to be aware of if they don't?
I mean, there is, and like I said at the onset, this is a really important program to us. That said, we as a water agency struggle because we're struggling right now. Tomorrow, our board is going to approve or is expected to vote on a budget they've been considering for the past 4 months that includes pretty significant rate increases. And the challenge is we get our revenues through water sales, and yet we incentivize conservation, right? So it's kind of it's a tough business model. So there has been some pushback from some of our directors for why are we funding conservation? This is one, it's happening. Water use is at record lows. We've done a fantastic job in Southern California of reducing our water use. It's also been raining, so people use less water when it rains, right? Which is also didn't always happen that way. It's great. It's a good sign that people have learned, to turn off their irrigation systems, et cetera. But I don't foresee this program not being funded. It's certainly in the budget that's being considered tomorrow is funded for the next 2 years, but there is always that risk. There's also always the risk that it's going to run out of funding. But the amount that it's given every year that those funds will run out. It's still extremely popular with most of our directors. I don't realistically think it would ever end. But there is that conversation happening in the backdrop that, as a water agency, we're asking people to not buy our product. So, yeah.
All right, let's see if we have any other questions before I keep going.
I just want to say one thing because Rebecca is here and she would probably streamline our information to the right place. So people keep asking oh, it's raining so much. Why should we pull the lawn off? So what I tell them is the lawn which has pesticides, which wash off, and then it goes to the ocean and kills the fish. So you have a long chain which you have to think about. And it's not that, oh, it's just raining. So that's another thing which I don't know whether it shows up anywhere in your conversation, but
Yeah,
I thought I'd
and
pass it on.
we share that. We share just, it's not just about lower water use. It's about, restoring a much more ecological landscape to the region that, I mean, anyone who has California native or friendly landscaping knows that it's just, they're these beautiful oases for birds and wildlife. And so yeah, we do talk about those
Yeah.
other benefits. The other thing is just, I mean, we all know that the next drought is around the corner. Anyone who thinks otherwise is kidding themselves. So, and it'll be more severe. It'll be, and for having experienced the drought that we experienced a couple of years ago, particularly again in Claremont, where we had to shut off our water. Those native landscapes were fine, right? They didn't need to be watered more than at all, right? It was the grass that died. So, when my daughter we turned off our water before the mandates just because I knew they were coming. So our grass died before any of the neighbors did. We still have a little bit of grass in our backyard. Again, my kids use it, so it's allowed. But our whole front yard is friendly and native landscape. Anyway, so our grass died in the back, and my little girl was very upset and was crying, and mommy, you're supposed to fix this. Metropolitan killed our lawn. Why did you fail? Blah blah blah. The whole 9 yards. I was talking to her about how beautiful looking around Claremont is, and that all of these landscapes that you see, those are the ones that are going to thrive and they're going to be fine. And walk around and look. Yes, the grass is going to die, and I don't know when it's going to be back. So I don't know when this drought's going to be over, but you just walk around Claremont and see, all of these landscapes will thrive during the drought. They don't need water during, they'll survive right now. So anyway, I don't know where that tangent went other than I broke my girl's heart. Did exactly what you're not supposed to do and dove right in and talking about climate change and all these things.
Thanks for sharing the family dynamics.
I put my son to work. So he was 7. Now he's a teenager. He's not doing anything, but he feels the pride that he did.
That's awesome. Yeah.
All right, let's see. I have a quick question, sort of broader base. I was wondering if this program, if you all think of it in, working in coordination with any of the LA City or LA County sustainability plans, is the water saved that through this program sort of factored into those plans, or, are you working with those municipalities, or it's sort of separate?
I think it's sort of separate. I do, and I honestly don't know. So this is the carrot, the stick program, the stick things like the non-functional turf legislation that just passed, or 6 months ago, whatever it was, banning non-functional turf from businesses. That I think probably gets more incorporated into those plans, but this itself, because it's hard to know who's going to participate, right? It's hard to know what kind of interest we're going to get. I mean, we had gangbusters interest during that 14-15 drought. Again, with much lower kind of standards, right? You could just take it. There are all these companies who could just rip out your lawn, pave over with whatever, and make a profit. The rules were so simple. So we have not seen levels of turf removal like that since. Interest has been much lower, but much more steady. So I think it's probably a little harder for folks to count on necessarily. But I mean, it's a program that has a lot of interest, and does, during drought and even not, we've had great application numbers, and we also get great. We see a lot of folks who don't participate in their program but make the conversion anyway. They just don't apply for the rebate for whatever reason, but they remove their lawn and convert to sustainable landscaping anyway. So we see a lot of that too.
And I'm sorry, I just have one more question. it seems like there could be like a real equity issue at play with programs like this, where, people in Claremont or, a lot of the communities surrounding us can afford what, to fill the gap after the $3. You'd mentioned that there are some other water agencies that add on to what the rebate is, the $3 rebate.
Yeah.
Do you know how well that's being addressed in like frontline communities or,
Yeah, again, this is something that our board talks about a lot, and we've actually had consideration for we have various direct install programs for some of our other rebates, like for dishwashers and washing machines and things like that. It's a little tricky on what Metropolitan is allowed to do based on who we are as a federal or as a government agencies and who we can provide incentives to. So it gets really complicated on legally what we're allowed to do. But that said, we're having conversations about it. There is interest, and we've applied for grants for direct install programs in DAC communities. But it's something that we talk about. We talk about that not only are we asking people to not using resources to not buy our product. So you hear that conversation, but you also hear a conversation of we're providing rebates to only, to segments of the population who don't financially need them, and we're not doing the same. We're not providing the same incentives to disadvantaged communities, and so yeah, it's a tough question and it gets tricky. If the bottom line question though is let's use less water as a region, it doesn't from Metropolitan can be somewhat agnostic about it, right? Because it's all about just let's use less water. Again, equity wise, when you talk about creating, heat islands and things like that, we certainly have those discussions, and the board is attempting to address them, but there's a lot of different perspectives, and it does get tricky. But we are applying for grants. That's one of the big ways where we can do it, is we can apply for grants from the state and from the federal government, who don't have the same restrictions and limitations on what legally they're allowed to do. And so once we get those grants, then we can kind of pass them along and through these direct install programs.
Great.
Yeah, I think in this case, it just occurs to me that this may be one of the few sort of equity discussions where this program really is okay in the sense that most low family incomes do not own homes; they're renting, and so if the low income families ask their landlord to investigate, they want to do the right thing, and they get to know their landlord, and they say, would you be interested in I'll do some of the work, but would you apply for a rebate that and make up the difference and so forth, then this program really provides an opportunity where it really wouldn't be done otherwise if the landlord.
And that's a little bit of where, when you talk about non-functional turf and where, where the new legislation falls and some of the dialogue around that, which is like, okay, so, if you have a community with a lot of different apartment buildings and there's, a little bit of grass in front of them, and they take out that grass, which is non-functional turf, right? What's to incentivize them to replace it with, anything other than pavement, right? Which is the last thing any of us want. So yeah, those are good. It's an important conversation that a lot of organizations are having in LA in particular.
Well, it looks like we're just about at 8 o'clock. And so we want to be respectful of your time, Rebecca. So I just wanted to thank you again so much for speaking to us and giving us all that great information and kicking off our discussions on this great program. And we hope to see you in a couple of weeks at Last Name.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be there, and I'll bring some supplies, and I will look for some answers to your to those questions that you had regarding the time limits, and then I'll share the thoughts about that you shared regarding the what you don't see and the different strategies that are being used by less trained landscapers. So Appreciate it. Thank you. I'm really glad you guys are interested. And again, if you are finding folks that are just like finding all of this application process too burdensome, please let me know, because we want to share that. And you know, if quite honestly, if folks in Claremont are finding it too burdensome to participate, then that says something for, you know, for the larger Southern California. So please let us know.
Thanks,
you.
Rebecca.
Thank
See your
you.
last name.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.